Hi, this is Ryan Salazar. I'm with Scott Carroll of NewTek. How you doing, sir?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's awesome to have you. So, everything's you guys are getting ready. Everyone's preparing their booths. What does NAB mean to NewTek?
Well, NAB is simply the biggest event of the year on our calendar every single year. We put more resources and more people towards this presentation at this event than any other single time of the year for any other event.
Okay, so I'm looking at the TriCaster TC1. Let's talk about that.
Right, we just announced it a couple weeks ago. It's the most powerful TriCaster ever built. It's got 16 inputs of true 4K. It'll do 4K 2160p at 60 frames per second, and it's an IP native switcher. So if you're looking towards the future and you're thinking, I need 4K and I need to do IP-based production, the TriCaster TC1 will do it for you.
It's so amazing how everything's evolved over the years, and I'm an old school guy. I've got used to the STI cables, but it's if you're even more old school and you're thinking component back in the day, it's just amazing that you can do it over a network now.
Well, not only that, you're aware of NDI, which is a new technology that we made royalty free for anybody that wants to use it. It's basically a technology that allows a video source over a standard network to be able to be seen and shared. So your audience will like to know that at NAB this year, there's 40 companies that we're connected with here in the building that are using NDI to share resources with us and with other companies, so the sources can be shared. That's a first for NAB, and obviously we're very excited about it.
So you guys go way back to the days of the toaster, and I was in cable television as a kid, and it's amazing that your company itself has evolved to what it has become. Tim Jennison has got to be quite proud of that.
Well, he was a visionary, and his original vision in the 80s is still true today, that one day your favorite show is going to be made by you or somebody you know. So we've been sort of focused on democratizing broadcasting for anyone. So if you think about it, it wasn't that long ago where 100% of the content was made by less than 1% of the population, right? So that paradigm has absolutely shifted. The IT age, the digital age is the reason why, and NewTek is not only the tip of the spear, it's the spear, and we've been throwing that spear in that direction for the last 30 years.
Okay, so let's talk about the recent Media DS announcement.
Sure. So Media DS is basically it's actually there's a demo of it right here. It's a box that if you wanted to stream directly to your audience, you could do it. So it takes some of the technology that's built into a TriCaster and then kind of multiplies it. So it'll give you 4 streams out, meaning you could take your show and simultaneously put it out on 4 different delivery networks. You could also, if you're inside of a firewall like a school or a business and you don't want to go out of the firewall and back in, you can use that to stream directly to your audience within the firewall, and it gives you all the sort of proc amp controls and other broadcast tools that folks would be familiar with NewTek.
Okay, so what else have you guys? Oh, 3Play. I'm in love with 3Play. We're using it at the NAB Show Live studio.
Well, 3Play is an instant replay and slow motion unit. It's the machine that took that particular functionality from you need a lot of capital, a lot of people to be able to afford this and do this, to high schools are using this now for their football game production, so they get replay. So if you're watching sports, anybody watching sports these days, they're going to expect that you have replay and slow motion. But it'll not only do sports, it's also good. We have a lot of customers that use it for just as a playout server. When they have some content ready, they need to go live, and they'll just use a 3Play to play it out.
All right. Trying to think of what else.
I'll tell you what else.
Yeah,
we got
go ahead.
something called the IP series, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the TriCaster TC1, that's a 16 input 4K, true 4K machine. IP series will do 44 inputs of 4K natively, and I don't think there's any other machine out there available that can make that claim.
That's amazing. All right, from the NewTek booth, we're going to be here tomorrow. The show opens. It's going to be an amazing show. I wish you guys the best this week. Again, Scott Carroll, Director of PR with NewTek. Thank you so much for spending some time with us on NAB Show Live.
Thank you.
Howdy, I'm Jack Harris, a quasi-journalist with News Radio 970 WFLA, Tampa Bay. You're watching NAB Show Live.
Live from Las Vegas, this is NAB Show Live, produced by Broadcast Beat.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to NAB Show Live. We're here in Las Vegas, and this afternoon I'm going to be talking with my guests about media logistics. Can you imagine all the content that is out there today? It must be an absolute nightmare to try and manage it. But let me introduce my guest. Next to me, and Jonathan is not co-hosting with me, but we had so many people interested. So Jonathan Morgan, who is CEO of Object Matrix. Next to him is David Cole, who is CEO of IPV. And next to him, Jimmy Engelbrecht, who is CTO and co-founder of Cantemo. Is that how I pronounce it?
Cantemo.
Cantemo, okay. And then finally, but certainly not last, David Schiefer, who is COO of PrimeStream. Welcome, gentlemen. With all this data, I'll start with you, David. With all this data and content, how on earth do you find it?
Well, it's an interesting problem, and you're absolutely right, and it's an explosion of content in the market right now. And we're seeing it not just in broadcast, but in all media companies. And I think the answer is to, for us as businesses, to make sure that it's a very intuitive experience when you look for things, and make sure those assets are found very expediently and efficiently. And I think that's the challenge. And one of the things we focus around and concentrate on the fact that you employ creatives to do exactly that, to be creative, and they're most efficient when they can find the resources that they want to be able to use to tell a compelling story. At the end of the day, you have to get the content supply chain right, from the raw materials that come in to the outbound content, which is generating the revenue or telling the story in the way you want to do it. And it always amazes me how much content there is out there, and bringing all that to a user in a way that they understand what they're seeing. So you present it in an intuitive way, and you don't try and you demystify the technical stuff behind it. It's not about the technology. It's about the experience that the user has, and making them collaborative. There are more and more teams around a distributed workforce these days, and being able to share those resources efficiently and effectively.
Okay, so assuming these days most of the content's going up on the cloud, does that make it easier to manage, to search for what you need? Because presumably you've got content in different formats and different versions, etc.
Well, I think one of the things we do actually is we normalise the content. So we remove the complexity of having different raw material types and present that in using a proxy format. So it's very consistent interaction with the content from a user perspective. At the end of the day, the creative doesn't need necessarily to know some of the complexity that's behind the scenes. And if you demystify that, it means they can actually get on with, as I said, their job, and that's to tell a compelling story.
Right. Okay. Jimmy, what's hybrid cloud approach?
The hybrid cloud approach is really about trying to leverage the cloud fully to be able to aggregate all your media into the cloud so you can, through a wider enterprise organization, can access it from everywhere. And as you already said, that is done through proxy. But what you also need to do is to solve all the little technical tricky problems, which is yes, I have all my storage locally, and yeah, in 20 years all video is probably stored in the cloud. We don't really know yet, probably, but right now broadcasters and big organizations are not putting everything up there yet. But you can use the cloud as a mothership. You can put all the proxy that you talked about up there. You can put all the metadata up there. You can put all the media logistics up there. You can get scaling effects in the cloud within transcoding, and the trick that we are doing now with the platform, with the new stuff that we're showing on the show now, is that you can create the proxy locally, reading the high-res locally, pushing the proxy up in the cloud. So you don't have to, if you don't want to, put all the full resolution content up in the cloud. That's going to be optional. And I think for probably a decade it has to be like this, because video files are still very large.
If everything's going on the cloud in 20 years' time, I'm going to be really surprised. But that's another topic on sustainability. But anyway,
let's see.
Let's see. Yes. Okay. David, any comments on that?
Well, back to your original question, I think we've solved the problem of how to find material.
Right.
And to touch on some of the issues that were just brought up, it's not just finding it, it's being able to use it. So what we've focused on is really allowing people to find it, and then the right people to use the right resolutions in the right locations in the right way. We've got customers who have their central location, and the cloud just becomes an intermediary in that, whether they're hosting the material in their site or whether it's out on the cloud. It's a technical problem to solve, and ultimately what they want to do is to enable somebody sitting in a hotel room to be able to open up their laptop, connect through the cloud, through the internet, using all the technology we have available to us, and get their job done, whatever that might be. It could be just adding a bit of information to the content so that somebody at headquarters can leverage it and use it more efficiently. Or it could be actually editing a piece because they just came from the action and they know it best. So really, when we're working with storytellers, and that term gets lost sometimes, that we're ultimately trying to tell stories. We're trying to give them the flexibility to do it whenever, wherever, however they want.
Yeah, and in order to make a good story, they've got to be able to get access to the content. Jonathan, how do content providers maximize the value of all this content, particularly when it's coming from all different places?
That's a big question. I think if I would take issue with one of the first things you said is all of the content going to the cloud.
I'm only saying what Jimmy said.
I would really dispute that all of the content is going to the cloud.
I agree with you, by the way.
For instance, we were working with a security agency, 5,000 HD cameras generating 26 petabytes of data every 2 weeks.
Yep.
Now, you don't just push that down a 1 gigabit link to the cloud. For instance, a system we pull in with 260 gigabits of bandwidth, you don't have that to the cloud. So the broadcaster, the post-production agency, etc., nowadays, there just isn't the bandwidth at the moment to go to the cloud. But what is the cloud apart from somebody else's computer, actually? Not very much.
It's not this ethereal thing up in the sky where data just sort of goes up there, I know.
But the cloud is actually a lot more than just somebody else running your own computer. It's about a set of infrastructure, a set of APIs that is completely standardized, so you can use completely new deployment measures and things like that. So it is more than somebody else running your computer. And 20 years from now, we don't know what is then. I mean, look back 20 years, what we had then, and compare to what we have now.
Well, the cloud, at the end of the day, the cloud is an abstraction layer. Right?
Exactly.
But we're getting back to the subject of media logistics, and rather than the important thing, as you say, is that there's a hybrid model right now in terms of providing a balance between what customers need, and I agree with David on the subject of making sure the resources are in the right place at the right time for the right use for the right reasons. And so one of the examples I would chase, we have a very large retail customer, so not a typical broadcaster, the Home Depot of the world, and what we're able to provide them the ability to do through a distributed workforce is that they can start work on the assets that are at their base from a remote location, so they can begin at home the editing process for creating that story and telling the end user on how to use their product. And then by the time they've made the commute, all those assets have been restored out of the archive, ready for their finishing at the actual base. And so again, I think it's about actually, from a media logistics perspective, it's very much about enabling people to be more creative in the process and not get locked down with the technology.
If I could
Go
say,
ahead.
to me, that's exactly right. One of the words I haven't heard anybody say is storage. It's not about storage anymore. It's about what we would term as digital content governance, which is about pulling data into an area to store, yes, but having the data available in the right places at the right time, having the right lifetime availability of that data, and knowing what you want to be able to search for, how to find it, how to get it, and as you say, content distribution, having it in the right place at the right time. So today's problem isn't what yesterday's problem was. Actually, if you go back a few years, all of this began because tape was very simple. You took a tape, you put it on the shelf, you couldn't do much else with it. Then you started to have disk-based storage. Disk-based storage was okay, but the first problem that people had was they bought a silo of storage, they bought another silo of storage because you kind of moved on a bit. You bought another silo of storage and suddenly you're managing multiple pools of disk-based storage.
Yeah.
And the challenge actually became away from that, and it became how to digitally manage all of this content in a way that you can work with it and you can use it at the right time in the right place.
Mm-hmm. But back to my original question is, how can you maximize value from all this content?
By having it the right time, the right place.
Okay.
So,
yes, David.
Sure. There are a couple things. I mean, we're talking about a lot of technologies, and they actually have different cost bases, for example. So we use, object storage to be able to move content to the cloud when it's appropriate. Not that we want it in the cloud just to be able to say it's in the vapor someplace. What people are, when the usage model is such that you don't need it stored locally and the cost of doing so in that local storage silo is going up, then we move it automatically into the cloud because that's a lower cost per unit that you're trying to store. And ultimately, we're still solving the same problems that we did with tape. I remember the days when tape was simple, but it would pile up and pile up and pile up. And the solutions then were shelves that would, move together and let you go in and leverage your square footage. And then ultimately you would remove those tapes and move them to a different facility. So we're doing the same things now, but we're doing it with bits instead of tapes.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going to be shown at the show. David, I believe you've got something new with Fork.
We do. We take a multi-pronged approach, not to make a joke about forks, but to roadmaps. And roadmaps tend to be driven by customer requirements, by what the industry is doing, competitors, etc., but also, by our own ideas. So this new version of Fork that we have coming out is really focused on a couple of things. We wanted to make the product easier for people to use, so we focused on user experience, we focused on simplifying it and adding more stability to the product so that it can be drop dead simple to use. And then we've enhanced our overall solution, whether it's Fork or whether it's Exchange, for example, to include a lot of new features and to chase some of the market drivers like VR 360, for example, or 4K that we're seeing a lot of discussion around. So basically, we want to be able to say yes to anybody who walks into the booth. We can solve your problems, and here's how.
Okay. To the rest of you, what new things can we expect to see from you at the show?
So Object Matrix is showing the Matrix Store product. It can act as a private cloud or as a hybrid cloud. Mm-hmm. So storing the data, storing it locally or remotely, but having all of that wrapped into a digital storage governance platform that will actually look after that data for you so that you can do the work, and the management software is virtualizing the handling of the storage of the data in the background.
Okay. David?
Well, rather than actually talk about specific product, perhaps, I'd like to maybe push back into the whole theme around the logistics. One of the things that we'll be showing at the show is that we've been doing a substantial amount of work in analytics. So actually helping users understand the processes, which assets are in flight and how often are those assets touched. You mentioned earlier about how do people get more out of their assets, and I think going back to the point about tape as well, the problem with file-based systems is that it's too easy to keep replicas or duplicate resources, and it's you cannot have enough storage to solve that problem if you don't tackle it head on. So one of the things we'll be showing and majoring on at the show is how using the analytics of the use of the system from both the perspective of allowing people to be more productive with those assets, but also helping the content owners and the resource owners streamline those processes and not necessarily have to go and buy more storage, but make more use of the storage you've got. And I think the other advantage of that is it also informs the debate. We talked about roadmap. I think the best way to drive a roadmap actually is for like all of the major companies now, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, they use analytics to help them drive their business. And I think we have to be smarter in the media production companies as well, and vendors have to provide our customers the ability to drive those processes cost effectively.
Okay. And Jimmy, from Cantamo, what can we expect?
We're showing a Cantamo Iconic for the first time at any show, and it's a media aggregation platform in the cloud, and it's tailored to, I would say, two different types of customers. The first one is those that have multiple Cantamo portal installation, which is our media asset management product. And the idea is here to aggregate all the content from all of those on-premise installations into the cloud. And the other type of customers that we're trying to speak to is those where the entry of barrier for buying a Cantamo portal system was simply too high, and where the media management needs are maybe not as sophisticated and maybe not as production heavy as we'll be able to support in Cantamo portal.
With the way the industry, particularly with media logistics, has changed, do we need a different skill set for people? Because certainly in two of the shows I've done on totally different topics, this seems to be a really demanding thing. Where are the engineers? Where are the people who can manage what we're moving towards?
Right. So what we're finding is that there are fewer engineers, especially in the U.S. market, in the tradition of the old chief engineer. And we're finding different skill sets required and different people moving into those skill sets. There's also another displacement going on, and we see customers coming to us and saying, well, actually, I don't want to do that this way, the way the industry has been doing it. I want to bring in an intern and I want them to do it on their tablet or on their phone. And when we think of people logging or people accessing the assets or doing jobs that were specific and done in a specific way in the past, all of that's changing, which is why there's certain features like one of our features is around workspaces. And that is totally focused around you being able to build an environment for a user that you've decided you needed in your workflow.
Is that the Exchange workplace?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd like to push the boundaries on that subject slightly.
Go for it.
Because I do agree that it is, we're seeing a massive reduction in those specialist skills that broadcasters have always been used to. And one of the ways we're tackling that, we've just won a major deal with a very large US network to provide a software as a service solution, right? And I think that is more likely to be where we see the skill set changing, in that instead of our customers wanting to have to employ technical staff to maintain and manage the infrastructure, they want to move towards what you might say is the ultimate goal of where when you for example, what is software as a service? Well, if you think of it perhaps as a taxi, you don't own the car and you don't drive it, right? You just get in it and pay for somebody to deliver you where you need to be. And I think that's where we'll see the market moving quite rapidly, actually. And I think, as I say, as a vendor, we're very on the front foot with that approach, providing a managed service to our customers in order to be able to provide a much more streamlined and cost-effective approach. Now, it does change, of course, the dynamics of how people pay for things, right? And I think that's something also the market has got to come to terms with. And it's no longer, I think, just about recruiting the right engineering staff. It's about thinking more, more business savvy thinking inside the media companies about how they're going to go forward, focusing on what they do, telling the story, compelling content, bringing their audience what they need, and less about the technology and the products that they have to make that work.
Jonathan, what do you feel about the skill set? Are you seeing that there's a lack of a certain skill? And I'd like to know what sort of skills. Is it particular software? Is it the creative side? Is it specific, fundamental engineering skills? What's missing?
I would have to agree with the rest of the panel that there's a big movement away from specialist IT skills and into running using your core competences to produce programming. One great example I had of that recently, I went to New Zealand and literally the television station was being run out of a cupboard. They had a cupboard with a rack of equipment. They were using various services on the internet for various different delivery pieces of the television station. And the people who were working there were just focused on what content is going to be delivered when, and they could actually do that nowadays. You could never do that even 5 years ago.
No, okay. Do you agree with the sort of skill set that's missing?
Yeah, I do agree, and I think it's a good change because our customers can then focus on strategic storytelling, on what they can do with the solution rather than on the technical. They're leveraging on the technical skills, and I think on the technical side, I think the trend that we have been seeing for the last 20 or 30 years, that hardcore IT skills become more and more and more important, and that will just continue. I mean, this is hardcore IT skills with knowledge about video is still going to be more in demand than it was in the past, so to speak, on the technical side.
So you were going to say something?
I was going to say it's interesting to hear engineering in the broadcast environment discussing core IT skills, which just a couple of years ago was a separate department, not even a skill that chief engineers had. And now we're talking about even that kind of being left behind. This is all driven by cost and by a changing landscape where deliverables are changing on a regular basis. The skill set of people coming in is changing on a regular basis. And if you go into a software as a service model, I would liken that more to renting a car. You still drive the car, you're just not buying the car to have and dealing with it, kind of when you need it and in the size and portion you need it. The managed services side, which David touched on, is truly a change in how broadcasters think, because you're not staffing up the people who maintain it. When you need to add a user, you pick up the phone and you send an email. When you want an audit at the end of the year as to what happened in your system, you ask this third party. And it's quite a responsibility and a transformation for companies like ours in the industry.
Absolutely, and it goes back to my point earlier about analytics. To be able to run that service effectively, you've got to be able to report back to the owners how it's working and what they're getting out of the series, because they need to be able to justify those decisions to move in that direction. And I agree with you that I think there is a balance, and I think we'll see it as a trend that the rental, the subscription model, where you still want to retain a certain level of control over your own destiny, but you don't necessarily want to own the infrastructure or have those ongoing capital costs that you've got to write off. And David, you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, it's economies that will drive the way in which the media industry adapts. And I genuinely think that the approach we will see is much more towards the traditional IT market, which is already there. I mean, you already effectively have managed services for most IT systems that you use in business today. So it's not like we're setting a new trend in the world. What we're doing is as a business, media industry is catching up.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of time left, but I'd just like to bring up the point of we've got all this content possibly now being managed by different people. How secure is the content? Because that's IP for a lot of people.
Wow, it's a big question in a short time. There have been very public displays of loss of content, and that is a major concern. Any platform that you decide to go for as a company needs to have those layers of security around access, around the security of the data itself, and actually, again, using or having those skills in-house is becoming increasingly difficult, and having those skills supplied to you by a good content governance provider is where you need to be going.
Yeah. Any comments briefly on security?
Security really depends on secure from whom. If it's the NSA, I give up. If it's your competitor down the street, well, in the U.S., Sarbanes-Oxley requires anything that hits the cash register to be audited, and you have to understand who has access to it, who has access to the network, and all of those things. And they become critical when you're running a managed service to be able to give that confidence to your customers, because they need it for their auditors. So it all gets to be, really driven by policy.
Gentlemen,
Well, I agree. I must
we're
just
running
say
out of time, David.
It pushes a different perspective from the vendors in terms of liability.
Yeah. We've run out of time, guys. I found that really interesting. I've learned a lot. I hope the audience has learned a lot. I'd like to thank my guests, David Schaefer, Jimmy Engelbrecht, David Cole, and John Morgan. Thank you very much for joining us. I have a show tomorrow on tiny cameras. Join me at 10 o'clock. Stay safe in Vegas.
Hey, what's going on? Jamie Alexander here with Broadcast Beat, and I'm here at Gear House with my buddy Mark. How are you, Mark?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Really excited to be here. So, as you guys can see, we're in some sort of a warehouse situation, but we're going to break it down for you. We're in front of this large mobile unit, and Mark, I want you to tell us all about what this is and why it was important for you to create this.
We needed to up the ante for the latest technology, which currently is 4K. Because of the complexity, the amount of sources, the amount of machinery needed to make this stuff happen, we had to go to something that was built with exactly the same materials as super yachts are made from, which is Columbus, which is a 4K truck right here needed to make this truck. Has a number of features in it that are very different to your typical truck you'll find in North America. Normally on the old trucks you crank things up with a handle, and basically two guys after about 45 minutes get very strong arms doing this to both lift the truck off the ground and pop out what we call an expando, which is this part of the truck. So what happens on this one is, going underneath, I will pull this out, we have a remote control. And what this remote control does is we stand off, we hit a button, and this truck deploys 4 hydraulic legs, and then the whole truck lifts itself off the ground. When it's happy that it's level, it pops this side out here by itself, and the floor folds down. And this truck deploys...
Okay, this looks great. So this is the recording area. What makes this different and special on this mobile unit?
We utilize EVS, who are a well-known survey company, and what they do is these machines enable us to record multiple sources of 4K or HD, and we're able to record them so the client can walk away with their own hard drives of what we recorded all day. But more importantly, or as importantly, we also do replays here. These are typically generated at a station like this. What makes this different is that we're able to move these stations anywhere around this truck. And that is mainly thanks to a system we've implicated in full here called VSM. So VSM is made by a German company called Lavo. What's important about that is this truck has so many sources, video and audio coming into it. We handle 4,096 by 4,096 audio cross points, and then close to 1,000 video cross points. A human being is in charge of all this, and we kind of got to the point where honestly we're kind of asking too much of a guy, as you could imagine.
Right.
So we have a brain that sits over all this called VSM that enables us, once we've told the brain how many sources there are, what they do, where they go, video and audio, and if you add all that up, I just told you, you're looking at like 5,000 by 5,000 sources. A guy has to tell the brain at the beginning what these sources are, and once it's in, and that took us quite a long time to do, but the beauty of it now is when we want to move any source to somewhere else and even change the way the panels are configured, so if someone's used to it a certain way and they want to move either down there or down the back end of the truck where we're going after, or anywhere in this truck, we just press a button and all of a sudden they get the same layout in front of them, they get the same panels, and we can do that very, very quickly and easily. And that makes people happy. The truck where we're going after. Effectively, this is a 15-person control room. Again, because of what I said earlier on about VSM and the way that we can manipulate and move easily certain positions, working positions, operational positions around a truck, we've kind of given people a palette, for want of a better word, of a production palette. So they walk in and we go, who do you want where? We're not telling them where they go.
Yes.
And that's a big, big difference.
So this monitor wall is pretty amazing. Is this in 4K also?
Yes, it is. This happens to be the only all 4K monitor wall currently in North America that we know of. We've done our research, so I think it's safe to say it.
Thank you so much for spending your time showing us this remarkable creation. And
Not at all.
gosh, so much more to come, right?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, keep them peeled for sure.
Okay.
Las Vegas, this is NAB Show Live, produced by Broadcast Beat.
Welcome back to NAB Show Live by Broadcast Beat. I'm so excited. Today we're going to be talking about audio. You know, a lot of times the audio guys, like Rodney Dangerfield, they don't get no respect. But I think that you'll find that my two guests are very respectable guys, right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. I have Robert Dalton Jr. here. He's the co-founder and CTO of Dysonics. And I have David Gould. He is the Director of Audio Content Solutions for Dolby Labs. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Okay, so we're going to start out. We're going to be talking about surround sound, object-oriented audio, VR audio. There's all different terms. And I was wondering, David, if you could take a crack at helping us understand the difference between these often misunderstood words.
The many terms of audio. Well, I mean, I think there's certainly in the past few years, I think surround sound has a fairly well-known what it means. And then in the past few years, we've had immersive audio, we've had 3D audio, we've had virtual reality audio, we've got ambisonics, we've got beamformer, we've got all of these other things.
Are they all the same thing?
No, they're not all the same, but there are a number that sort of are the same.
Okay.
Just thinking more on the non-VR side of things, just to start there. Movies and TV. For about 20 years now, people have been making movies in what we would call surround sound, which was like 5-1, 3 across the front, 2 behind you. If you're in a large movie theater, those 2 behind you would probably be an array of speakers, just to kind of fill the room a little bit. And then around 2010, 2011, 2012, people started getting interested in, well, what next? Where do you go from there? And then there was this idea of 3D audio and putting audio above you. What would it mean if there were speakers in the ceiling? And people had tried that, and there were installations, but how would you make that a real mainstream thing? And so Dolby, for example, we came out with our Dolby Atmos format, and it wasn't so much about just adding more speakers, because that's only a part of it.
Well, and it comes to a point in home decorating where you just can't add any more speakers, right?
It also comes to a point in audio production where just another two speakers, it just sort of gets repetitive. You've gone from 1 to 2 to 4 to 5 to 7. This kind of adding new numbers, it's like the newest numbers is better.
Dolby's Law, right?
It gets really difficult, and so that's where the idea of object-based audio comes in, which takes more of a scalable approach to that. So you have some channel-based stuff, so the surround sound still exists, you can still make content in the same way, but what objects do is it gives you more flexibility. So rather than it being just about the number of channels there are, it's more about having information about where that sound should play back. So within a room, within an environment, knowing that a sound should play back halfway up the wall to work with whatever you're seeing on screen is more useful than knowing that it should come out of this channel 2.7 dB down from this channel. And so that's one of the things that kind of was really interesting, that you move from just going from channels to this idea of channels plus objects. And then that brought along with it a whole bunch of challenges in terms of production and post-production.
I have no doubt, and we will get into that.
We'll definitely get into that. But then, the industry, as I say, there's people talk about immersive audio, there's 3D audio. I think we're sort of consolidating on immersive audio is sort of the catch-all phrase. That seems to be the one that is catching on, in the cinema space, for example.
I just cheated and I titled this panel The Audio Around Us, because I didn't want to be responsible for picking the right.
And that's really where that's really what it's all about. It could all be called surround sound. 5.1 is pretty immersive when done properly. Like, all these terms don't really matter, but the industry's kind of decided immersive is the thing. There's the immersive audio bit stream that's being standardized by SMPTE, for example, and that's where people are looking at it. But then, as we get into more of the headphone and VR technology, it starts going under the head. You have kind of 360 true, all around you audio as well. So there's always more to do, but it's been an interesting journey. We were just chatting before the panel started about, there was kind of this turning point in 2012 where everything was kicking off, and it's been an interesting few years that have sort of got us to where we are now.
Well, let me see if I've got this object audio thing right, object-oriented audio. So if I have a film and there's a bumblebee, and the bumblebee starts in this part of the room and buzzes around close to my head and then goes back behind me, object audio is going to recreate that experience in the space where I'm listening. Do I get it right?
That's, the goal is that's correct. There are obviously challenges to that, but the goal is, rather than saying...
Oh, you mean it doesn't reach the absolute height of perfection every single time?
Well, of course it does do that. But, the journey to get there is sometimes not as perfect. But that's absolutely right. So you could be in a room that has 5 speakers, 16 speakers, 64 speakers, and rather than having to deliver a different set of channel outputs for that, you can just deliver that one audio stream plus the metadata, and then the renderer that is in that room.
If you use a word like metadata on my show, you have to explain it. Sorry.
But that is what goes along with the audio to describe how to play it back.
Okay.
And then there is a renderer an audio renderer that takes that audio plus that information and then renders it to the environment that you're in. So the renderer knows what the speaker configuration is, or whether you've got headphones plugged in, or how you are listening back, and then based on that information it gets from the audio stream plus the metadata stream, the information stream, it will then play it back as correctly as it can in that environment. So that bumblebee, as you say, even if you're in a movie theater with 10 speakers up the wall, or if you're in a home theater system with a 512 setup, that metadata means that it will play back in the same way and give you that same experience.
I see. So, Robert, you've been enjoying watching David on the hot seat. Now it's your turn.
Okay, I'll do my best.
I would love it if you could define this word ambisonic, because I've heard this a lot. So tell me what that means.
So ambisonics is not anything new. It's not something new. It's actually been around since the late 50s, early 60s. It came from academia, so a lot of research. It's highly mathematical, and it's basically ambisonics is a multi-channel format. So when you hear multi-channel, you think 5.1, 7.1. It's essentially another multi-channel format. The difference, though, is that the channels don't directly correlate to a specific speaker, right? So when you think 5.1, you think front left, front right, center, back left, back right.
Okay.
But what ambisonics is multi-channel. It's multi-channel content that represents the sounds, what we call sound fields. It's basically when you're in a space and the sound that's kind of all around you, that scene, that audio scene, is represented, all the directivity of all those objects in that scene is represented as this pressure on this microphone, right?
So the sound field of this environment is pretty complex,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of sources.
Yeah. So the idea is, if you wanted to capture in 360 degrees, how do you do that with a microphone, and then how do you represent that? So when you hear ambisonics, it's kind of a blanket term for there's a format, there's an encoding, there's a decoding. And there's a lot of variability in ambisonics, and so I think it's highly mathematical. So it can get very complex, to someone that's just kind of starting out and wanting to know exactly what it is and all the details, all the ins and outs. But one of the interesting things is that, just like there's 5.1 or 7.1, there's multiple channels. There's multiple orders of ambisonics as well. So there's
Okay, try that again.
So there's multiple orders, meaning there's a different number of channels depending on the resolution and the kind of the accuracy and the fidelity that you want to get out of that experience, right? So, for example, if you probably have heard ambisonics because some of these common video on demand kind of services, or YouTube, Facebook, they've been adopting an ambisonics format. They use something that's a first order ambisonics, meaning there's about 4 channels of audio.
Are they adopting it well?
It's early. It's early. So we're taking these we're taking these baby steps. You kind of have to crawl before you can walk, and that's really the stage that we're in right now. So there's a lot more sophisticated things that you could do, but the industry just has to catch up. I mean, so you start getting more exciting things when you get to 16 channels of ambisonics audio, which is third order ambisonics, and you can go up to 32 channels. You can go up more and more and more and more. The more channels you have, the more fidelity and more realism that you can kind of produce. But right now, it's either 4 or it's 8 channels of audio that are being distributed.
That makes a lot of sense. Although in my crazy mind, I'm thinking, third order ambisonics would make a great 70s band.
I'm sure somebody's come up with that before.
Probably.
Google it after this, and I'm sure you'll find something.
Somebody's on GoDaddy right now.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about the decisions that you need to make, before you even pre-production about your audio format and when that needs to be done.
I mean, I think it's getting earlier and earlier. I think there's so many different aspects to that. There's the obviously the sound aspect of that. If you're a sound team working on something, you need to know how it's going to be, what the finished product's going to be. But even directors and script writers and other people involved in the process, it takes a lot, and they don't all think like this, but occasionally you get editors and VFX people and other people in the kind of workflow who are looking at how they can take advantage of some of the enhancements in audio. How can they make a scene drag out a bit longer to let an audio cue work better. So there are a lot of different places in the process to think on it.
Not so much a fix it and post kind of scenario.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of that. There's always going to be a lot of that. Which I was on a panel yesterday where the comment of no project's ever really finished came up, which is true. Everything's changing, and we all know that's the inevitability of the audio post industry. But I think the more you can do up front, especially with things like music and sound design, knowing that you're going to have that accuracy, being able to sound design a scene with object-based audio in mind, with something like Dolby Atmos in mind, where you can place things very precisely. You can do things, if you're thinking about overhead content and you're doing sound design for a cave, you're probably going to do reverbs differently if you know that you're going to end up with overhead content. So I think the earlier you know, the better. But going back in time to the first few movies that were mixed, they started from basically a finished 5.1 mix and then went from that to Atmos, and there were still great things that you could do even though it was done at the very last minute. But the earlier you get going, the more creative decisions you can make that then stick with you throughout the whole process.
So speaking of starting the process, I understand that you have some fantastic mics, and I was wondering if you could talk to us a little about those mics and how they work and how you prep your sound recording set.
Sure. Yeah. So it's with anything with ambisonics, or we have our own format which we call MTB, which is another sound field kind of format. The idea is capturing audio in its kind of purest, most natural form in 360 degrees, then trying to replicate that, right? So we believe that you still do all the traditional miking that you would normally do. So you use lav mics for all your actors.
Oh, you mean you don't just set one big ambisonic mic and call it a day?
Some people do, but it depends on the production that you're trying to create. We actually our 8-channel format, which is called MTB, it's a binaural format. It's captured in 360 degrees, just how a human...
Binaural?
Binaural is essentially capturing... So normal binaural is you put microphones in your ears. It's capturing audio how we as humans hear, with two microphones, 2 ears. The thing that we do, though, is we capture binaural in multiple directions. Right? So now we capture you looking 90 degrees, you looking 270 degrees, and so we're doing all this capture simultaneously. And that's 8 channels of audio. So that's capturing audio just like you were there in that spot, which is about as realistic as you can get if that's the experience that you're going for. I want to feel like I'm in this, in this seat. I want to feel like I'm, in the concert. And then what you do in real time is we stitch that audio together as you move your head around the space. So it's an audio stitching algorithm, not a spatialization algorithm. It's still a sound field. It's a different type of sound field. Ambisonics is it captures a sound field, but it has to be. So I should back up and say that Dysonics primarily focuses on headphone playback, right? Which is the Bumblebee problem is a lot easier in a headphone environment, completely closed environment. You don't have to worry about projecting this over speakers, and so you can get these really amazing effects, be coming in, be going out, be coming back in. That's much harder to do over a speaker system. So.
Although you have a binaural output for Atmos as well, right?
That's correct, yeah. We have, there's an Atmos renderer that will, just part of the Atmos renderer is it can take that same metadata and create a binaural version of it. So, yeah, I mean, binaural and headphone playback is a huge thing. So much content is consumed on mobile devices over headphones these days that it's something that people are more and more keen to make sure is right. And as you say, some of the things that you can do with that, I mean, I think everyone who's even vaguely interested in audio has had the hair-cutting binaural YouTube video demo, which is it's an amazing thing, but then, that brings with it its own set of challenges in terms of trying to make something that is really compelling and, it's that sort of, it's almost hyper-real experience that generally comes with media. When you pick up a knife off a table, it doesn't usually go swing, like, every...
Well, it was like early stereoscopic, right, where there was always the sword that would come out of the screen. Right. They always want to play with the new tools. By the way, that YouTube video, it is digital haircut surround, I think, is a good search set on YouTube, and it is pretty interesting to hear surround sound in a binaural setting, which means both ears, like humans, as we learn. So, but why is that so important in terms of immersive content, in terms of VR, in terms of AR? Why does that sound so important?
Well, really, as we kind of start looking towards VR, towards virtual reality, where you have things happening all around you, like audio is your guide now through that piece of content. So,
what do you mean by it's the guide?
Well, so things could be. So now that things are happening all around you, it used to be that the director put in front of you on the screen everything that you wanted you to see. Maybe there's some sound effects left or right, but you're looking at that screen in front of you. Now, there could be things happening behind you, and so in order for the director to kind of get your attention to, hey, look behind you, there's a sound effect that's behind you that gets you to turn around.
So it's like a framing device.
It's a framing device, exactly. So
you can hear behind you, but you can't see behind you.
Exactly.
So you have to take advantage of that.
Unless you're Sister Mary Consuelo, my second grade teacher, but most people cannot see behind them, right?
Oh, the eyes in the back of the head trick?
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that's true, but I think, I've been told that it is so essential to the illusion of AR and VR for that audio to be precisely right. And I was just wondering if you've experienced a lot of AR and VR audio that is precisely right, or is this a baby step situation again?
My personal experience is that it is a baby step process. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of great companies like Dolby and ourselves that are really kind of pushing the technical boundaries and trying to kind of make that experience as realistic and as immersive as possible.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but I think that there's all these moving parts in the industry. There's video, there's audio, there's tools, and it's just this constant shuffling of what's going on. And so there's this evolutionary process that's happening right now, but it's getting there. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, though.
Okay, so I have 2 last questions that I ask everybody. First question: what can go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Not every example, but give me one.
So much can go wrong, and it depends on how broadly you're talking. Most of where I'm focused is around the kind of audio post-production workflow, and the introduction of object-based audio into post workflows has been, it's been a journey. Let's put it like that. And there's so much that can go wrong, because so much of what audio people do is send streams of audio through equipment, and they're used to some number of channels in, some number of channels out, and there's a lot of these 8-wide pipes, and there's just a lot of equipment and a lot of sort of mentality around there about how that works. And suddenly you throw this whole metadata thing in the mix, and it brings with it a lot and
metadata is kind of Teflon-y, isn't it? It doesn't like to stick to the content always.
It doesn't, but yet it's so vitally important. And so how do you keep those things together? And so, we spent a lot of time working with mixing console manufacturers, DAW manufacturers, to try and just get better at keeping those things together, because as soon as they fall apart, suddenly that stream of audio doesn't mean anything anymore. And that's a challenge. There's been cases where you've been using automation systems to be able to record that metadata, and recording it from one system to another along with the audio, because you have these very complex workflows where you're taking multiple source machines and trying to record all of the data into a finished recorder, but that now has to take audio plus metadata. So how do you record that metadata? So there's been a lot of technical challenges that have caused a lot of churn, and then there's also been creative challenges. Like, what do you do with this? What do I do with these overhead speakers? What do I do with these very precise sounds that I can put around you? And there's been a lot of experimentation, and some of it's worked and some of it hasn't. Certainly in the movie space compared to the VR space, where it is a window, there's a lot of fear about pulling things off screen. And because no one wants to take your attention away from what is on screen. And so there have been times, certainly early on, where something would happen on screen and there'd be a very valid reason why, given what just happened on screen, a very precise sound should come from a very specific area. But that would distract people. And there was an early example where there was a doorbell that was put behind you that had people turning around in the theater in the premiere of the movie. And that's the last thing a director wants to see. Right. Someone's eyes being pulled away because they thought it was like a cell phone going off or something. Okay. So there are those kind of creative challenges. But then the flip side is, you can, if it's the right environment, you can pull things off screen all you like. The movie Gravity, for example, was this wonderful exploration of what can be done with object-based audio, where the whole thing is in space. Have you seen the movie?
Yes,
and
it's amazing.
Like, everything is floating around you, and all of the imagery is floating around you, and you watch that in Atmos, and most of the dialogue isn't on screen. It's constantly moving around you, but it's not distracting because of the story that's being told and because of the environment you're in. So that's kind of where it works really well. But again, it's taken time for people to experiment around with it, and we've seen over the 5 years the sound designers and mixers who are coming back and doing their second, third, fourth, fifth mix in Dolby Atmos. They're learning more about what they can do with it.
Okay, so Robert, we've got just a little bit time left. Pull out your crystal ball now. Make your predictions. What do you think is going to happen in the next year?
In the next year, I think on the creative side, like David was talking about, I think people are going to get more comfortable mixing in object-based environments, because it really is a shift in thinking. You know, you don't think about, oh, I'm going to put the ambience in the back channels or anything like that. It changes how you approach the problem, how you approach sound. And so I think I think object mixing is where everything is eventually going to go. And now, what do you render that down to? You can still render it down to a sound field. You can still render down to channel and objects and metadata. That's just more of a distribution channel. But I think creating the content and creating an object-based format is where we're going to see a lot more attention over the next year.
So you think that these tools, these complex tools, are going to become more intuitive for people to use in the next year or so?
Yeah, I think that's the goal. That's the goal, to make it more intuitive and make it more robust to what they can do. And
because you have a AR system, right, for experiencing exactly what the user will hear. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think, and one of the things that we provide as well is kind of motion tracked in your DAW. So you have this full 360 feedback while you're mixing. So it's a real time kind of feedback that you're getting.
And David, I understand you guys have now native support for Atmos in Pro Tools?
It's pretty exciting actually. Just yesterday at the Avid Connect event, they showed off their native Atmos panning within the Pro Tools environment. So now the Pro Tools panner, rather than requiring an extra plugin to do the positioning and creating of metadata, from the Pro Tools panner itself, you can now generate that metadata to talk to a renderer. So every pan move you make, whether it's going to a channel or to an object bus, it's that same data can now flip easily between being an object bus or a channel bus. So that should simplify things a lot for post-production.
Just announced yesterday. Ooh, hot off the presses.
Hot off the press.
Right, well, I want to thank you so much, David and Robert, for being here with us today and talking about the audio around us. And I'm so excited to be here at the MedEffect 360 Theater, NAB Live, NAB Show Live. We'll be back with you soon.